Yes. And I had not seen Footloose um, until I was married to my current wife in my I think in my 40s. And I just, at the end of it, I was just like, this story is unbelievable. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the preacher sees the error of his ways. Like he understands what he did was wrong. Like that would never happen.
Welcome to another episode of RfR Deconstruction Stories. I'm Rob Palmer, and I'm an ambassador and helpline agent for recovering from religion. Often someone reaching out to us on the helpline asks the agent who's helping them to tell them where they stand on their religious upbringing, religious matters, their background, or hear about their deconstruction story. Well, personal disclosure is discouraged on the helpline, so this series is intended as an online resource where agents will now say, hey, you can take a look at this playlist on the Recovering from Religion YouTube channel to hear about agents. And hopefully these interviews will be helpful to anyone else questioning their faith who comes across this playlist on YouTube. In this episode, I'll be talking with David. Welcome and thanks for agreeing to share your story. I was hesitant to say your last name because I'm never sure I pronounce it right, and I don't know if you want to share it.
Well, yeah, it's Klinge is how you say it.
You pointed out before we went live here that you have a literal stack of Bibles behind you. We'll have to ask about that at some point. So,
this is only a small amount of the Bibles I have. I have a couple of other boxes in the basement. But yeah, I'll get into a little bit of why I have so many Bibles.
Yes. So what is your religious background?
So I was born into the Assemblies of God denomination. The Assemblies of God is a Pentecostal denomination based in Springfield, Missouri. And my parents met in Young Life, which is not affiliated with the Assemblies of God, but it is a evangelical youth organization. And somehow they ended up moving to a small little town in the middle of Washington State called Forks, Washington, and started attending the Forks Assemblies of God there. And I believe that's how they got affiliated with them originally. It's basically my earliest memories are packing up and moving across the country to Springfield, Missouri, so that my dad could attend seminary and get his master's degree in divinity.
He was all in, not just a congregant.
Yeah. Very, very much all in. I'm not. It didn't last very long. At least his ministerial career only lasted about 3 or 4 years. But after he finished his degree, we moved back to Washington State, and he got a job at a church in Clallam Bay, Washington, which is even a little smaller town than Forks, out in the middle of nowhere. And was there for about 3 or 4 years, and then he had an affair with a congregant, and so that ended abruptly. Of course, as a
and I guess you mean it came out publicly. Otherwise,
I believe that it came out publicly. I never knew it. I never knew it until I was an adult. It was kept from me and my brother quite well. But yeah, I didn't know that whole part of the story until I was an adult, and more indiscretions had transpired. I don't know if you know this, but there's a trope around preachers' kids, and evidently we are the bad stock. The preacher kids are the hell raisers, and I don't know how true that is. In my experience, it's fairly true. So,
hence the movie Footloose, right?
Oh boy. Yes, and I had not seen Footloose until I was married to my current wife in my I think in my 40s. And I just, at the end of it, I was just like, this story is unbelievable. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, the preacher sees the error of his ways. Like he understands what he did was wrong. Like that would never happen.
That's a good point. Hollywood, you know.
Yeah. That that whole catastrophe. So we ended up. So we lived in a house that was provided by the church. The church, we were basically mainly supported by the church. So when my dad was removed from that position, we were homeless essentially. And so we had to move. We moved back to the little town that I was born in, Forks, and lived with some folks there for a little while and got back on our feet. And for several years, my dad tried to find a new church to move to. And as as you can imagine, and as I know now, that would have been very, very difficult given the history and the reason that he was leaving the other church. And even though, Christians are forgiven and, he had repented of his sins and all these things, that still leaves somewhat of a bad flavor in folks' mouth. So, but yeah, he tried, and we ended up moving he fell back on his degree, which was in biology. And we moved to a little bit bigger town in Washington State called Wenatchee. And that's where I spent most of my formative years growing up, and spent a lot of time in church. We were in church. I think Gail says this. We were in church whenever the doors were open, right? Three nights a week at the very minimum, or 3 times a week at the very minimum. So Sunday night, and Wednesday evening. And then my dad, the pastor of the Wenatchee First Assemblies of God, where we ended up being, he was from Forks, and literally known him my entire life, and friends with my dad, and so he put my dad on the board, and my dad became a deacon of that church, and was in a position of leadership, and did end up preaching some Sunday nights and occasionally to fill in, but never made it back into to be a full-time pastor.
So did the church's beliefs stick with you? Were you ever a firm believer? Were you a true Christian?
Yeah, was I a true Christian? So not only was I a true Christian, I was a young Earth creationist.
Holy.
Here I have my Scientific Creationism. This was a book that I got probably in '94.
Are there pictures of children riding dinosaurs?
Boy, there aren't pictures. It's a text book. No, there aren't pictures, but they talk about that in here. I'm not sure if you can see the index, but that's the topics of what's going on in this book. And creationism or evolution, right? And this is a very much the Earth is 6,000 years young kind of a book.
How firmly did you believe that?
Very firmly, yeah. And I remember we had a fellow come, and when my parents bought me this book, we had a fellow come and preach on Sunday night, basically right out of that book, and it was kind of like, oh, here are all the scientific answers that alleviate our concerns around
the book's title is Science, right in the title. So
yeah, and it lays out that case that no, and of course it does not. To it, I think I was, this would have been 12 or 13 at the time. It was convincing to me, yeah, and I did, I well into my teens were having arguments with my friends about, whether plate tectonics was real, and that sorts of thing. And I have.
So you were aware that there were other, not only people but Christians who didn't, accept young Earth creationism.
Absolutely, particularly the Catholics, but the Catholics were wrong about everything, including that. Right.
That guy with the big pointy hat, he shouldn't be leading anything because God doesn't really talk to him.
Yeah, my mom is a what you would call a narrow path Christian. So these are people who believe that, like, me and the 7 people I go to church with are going to heaven, and everyone else is going to hell. Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses and Catholics, and Baptists.
Hell is a very, very, very crowded place, and heaven is.
Yes, correct. And there's like 7 houses, 7 mansions in heaven.
Where does this come from? I had a Bible literalist talking to me about the different sizes of the mansions. Like, we were arguing about whether Hitler's in heaven. If he got forgiven before he killed himself, and well, he's in one of the smaller mansions. It's like, where does this come from?
So it comes from the difference between being saved by works and being saved by grace. So when you're John 3:16, that's the sign that everybody holds up at sports games. God so loved the world that he gave his ever begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish. Right. So literally, all you need to do in order to go to heaven is believe in Jesus. So this means Mormons, this means Catholics, this means Jehovah's Witnesses. Everybody believes in Jesus,
psychopathic
right?
Killers, then too.
Yeah. Jeffrey Dahmer repented before he was.
Well, that doesn't even say repent; it just says believe in him, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, and then there's other passages about the good works you do on earth and receiving your heavenly reward. There's no mention of what your heavenly reward is, and so folks around the turn of the century, the Great Awakening period, kind of envisioned that those rewards would be a very nice house and a very nice crown. So you get jewels for your crown, and you get wings for your mansion in heaven, based on bringing people to the Lord, saving other people, and doing good works.
And Hitler just gets like a little outhouse shack, but he's not in hell because
or he just has the 6-wing mansion instead of the 12-wing mansion.
I don't understand how Christians think that's moral, frankly, but
it's not. None of it is. I mean, hell isn't moral, and an infinite punishment for a finite sin is, that's not moral.
So you were all in on that at once, right? And you did believe everyone else was going to hell.
I believed, well, yeah. So right up until I was about 15, 16. So right up to where I was, And I still held on to a lot of these ideas, but what happened at 16, 15 was my best friend came out, or was outed, actually. My best friend
outed in what context?
So he's a homosexual, and he was dating a girl, and she was becoming very sexually aggressive. So he kind of pulled her aside and said, "Hey, look, I'm gay, and I'm kind of dating you to for appearances and whatever." And she told everybody. And it was, I heard about it from other people before I heard about it from him. And he did eventually come to me, and he was like, I have something to tell you, and blah, blah, blah. But I stayed friends with him. This is 1994. So this is not when you didn't have gay friends in 1994. It just wasn't, especially not in Wenatchee, Washington. It's a cow town. It's orchardist but very, very very red state, and it was not accepted. And I was already a social pariah. I'd already I'd eat my lunch in the science room with nerds and whatnot. And so it wasn't amazingly devastating, but it was. It was. People stopped talking to me, and people at church knew. People at church would come to me and be like, "You are sinning for having a gay friend," and I'd be like, "Show me. Where is that? Point to the Bible verse that says I'm sinning because my friend is gay." And I would pull out, Jesus, hung out with tax collectors and prostitutes and.
But at the time, where was your religious head at? Did you think he was wrong?
A little bit, yeah. And he was Catholic, but like lukewarm Catholic. Would go to his grandparents were going to like a Latin mass. They were pretty hardcore about it, but his parents rarely went. They would go, maybe on Christmas, maybe on Easter. And I've it's the Bible's very clear about calling out the sins of non-believers. Like, you're not supposed to do that. You can call out the sins of believers. You can call out the sins of your brother, but you're not supposed to judge others, right? Judge or ye shall be judged. Judge not or you shall be judged, right? So my big point was, he was my friend. He's been my friend for years. Now we've gone through puberty. He likes dudes, and he's not putting the moves on me. He's not trying. That he had boyfriends most of the time we were in high school. So I didn't find it threatening, and I didn't find it to be a problem. And I was friends with other non-Christians. I was friends with other people who didn't go to church with me, and that was okay. What made this different? And I was convinced that I was right about this, and that I had biblical backing about this. And I was reading my Bible a lot in order to combat the accusations that were coming from my youth group, or coming even from adults in my church, who had found out, that were like, "You're in sin because you have a friend who's in sin." Like, how does that work exactly? Yeah, it ultimately was. This is where I first started questioning. Right. This is definitely where I first started questioning the standard narrative, and it's where I first started, questioning adults and what people had said. And when I would press my pastor and stuff like that, he would agree with me. He'd be like, "No, that's what the Bible says," and I'd be like, "Okay, good. I'm not off base." That was, to me, it was very important that I was living correct and I was living right by the Bible, and not by what people in church would say to me, right? And this whole time in my life was very turbulent at home as well. It was my brother and I have never gotten along. Really never had any sort of relationship. And this, one of the people who was very hypercritical of me having a gay friend was his now wife and the mother of his children. Those sorts of things have caused a huge, what has become an unhealable rift in our relationship. So, at home, it was more of just being a rebellious teenager, or just being willful, right? The prodigal son parable was used on me, or used to refer to me often, because I was so quick to dismiss the things that people were trying to, accuse me of, right? This all led up to a point where I ended up running away from home. So it was this situation where I had a fight with my father, and I ran out the door. This was the summer I turned 17, so I'm just very, very newly 17, and then I left, and I came back, and I've done this before. I would leave, and then I would come back in the night, and kind of sneak into my room and go to sleep, and then I would wake up in the morning, and the calmer tempers would prevail, and kind of move on with life. But this particular occasion, I come home and all the doors are locked, which was fairly normal. But what wasn't normal was my window was locked, and the spare key in the garage was removed. So these things were like, oh, I can't get into my house now. And these are definitely things that had been done since I had left, since I had walked away that evening. And just as I was contemplating figuring out what to do, and wanting to understand, am I going to have to ring the bell and wake up my dad at, 12:30 and 1 o'clock in the morning? I hear a train whistle from across the river, and it's the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad. And I know that if I can get across the river and get onto that train, that it'll take me to Seattle, and that I won't have to deal with this anymore. And so that's what I did.
Wow, you hopped a train too. Wow.
Yeah, very hobo style.
Wow.
And it was
with one of those poles and a little bag of stuff on the end of it.
So I didn't even have that. I was literally wearing a t-shirt and my shorts. I didn't have my wallet. I didn't have. Oh, okay. Excuse me. What I left out. What I left out here was that my gay friend had previously been run out of town because of the problems that he had at school, and he had moved in with his sister's friend in Seattle. And so I was like, I can get out of town. I can find my friend, and I can start a new life, or I can pick up there, and I don't have to deal with this stuff anymore. And I was close enough to 18 that I was like, I'm done with this. I'm going. And so I did, and I hopped that train, and I ended up taking it. So the geography of Wenatchee is, I had to cross a big mountain pass, and once we got over that pass, the sun had come up, and I was just sick and tired of riding on this train, and so I jumped off, and I ended up hitchhiking the rest of the way into Seattle. And to condense this story a little bit, it was Pride. It was the last week of June, I should say. And so I find myself in Seattle on Capitol Hill in the middle of the neighborhood, in the middle of Pride 1995. And it was something I had never seen, right? Here I was from, in this little town, having to know, maybe half a dozen gay people through my friend. And then suddenly I'm in this neighborhood that completely embraces and is completely welcoming and affirming. There was churches there that were welcoming and affirming to gay people. In fact, I got a meal at one of these churches, because I'm homeless and I'm trying to figure out how to feed myself and where to stay. And one of these welcoming and affirming churches, everyone's welcome, come, and they, came and fed me. Years later, I thanked the pastor of that church and told him the story. Told him that his congregation had fed me in my hour of need. Long story short, I end up basically being exposed to this entire community that was completely rejected in my hometown. And it wasn't very long before I ended up getting picked up by the police, and it wasn't anything in particular, but I did get nabbed by the police, and they called my dad, and he came and picked me up at the Capitol Hill Precinct Police Station.
So did you not try to hook up with your friend who was in Seattle?
I did. So excuse me, I'm rushing a little bit. Thank you for asking that. So as I said, I had left my wallet at home. I was sitting in my room, and my room was all locked up, so I didn't have my wallet. Which, in 1995, you would keep a list of phone numbers in your wallet because you didn't have a cell phone, you didn't have a. So my friend's phone number was in in my wallet. So in my pursuit of finding my friend, I went to these gay spaces, right? And it culminated in me going to one of the local teen crash pads, which is called the Lambert House, and it is still to this day. And I help them out when I can because they're a really good organization. But the Lambert House, and they had a float in the Pride Parade that year. And so I was like, what better way to try to find my gay friend than to be on a float in the Pride Parade? And so years later, we worked out that he was on the other side of the street. And, but yeah, I never did find him. I walked up to where I knew his friend's house was, or where I thought he was staying. I walked into that neighborhood and kind of walked around one day, but I kept putting myself in places where I would think I would run into. And had I stayed a little bit longer, had I not been whisked back to Wenatchee, I think that I probably would have ended up running into him. But it didn't work out. But I still got this kind of graduate level introduction to the gay community in Seattle, and that was very formidable to me, and like really shaped things going forward. And and seeing these, seeing that there were religious people who were gay, and that, oh, maybe being gay isn't the like abhorrent sin that I've been told it is. And it really started even more questioning about well, maybe what else has my church told me that probably and that was kind of the thing. I was really holding on to Jesus. Jesus and God are these loving deities, but my church is the one that's hateful and wrong. And it really that was really kind of how I continued to conduct myself into my 20s and 30s. But after that, after getting home, and I think that my 17th year and then into my 18th year, I was starting to work jobs that was like swing shift. And so I would do a banquet or a wedding on Saturday night, and then get home at 3:30 in the morning. I wasn't going to go to church, my parents didn't expect me to. And so after, probably 6 months of that, I just wasn't going to church anymore. And
did that cause a lot of friction with your parents?
So, me picking up and leaving was kind of eye-opening and shaking to them. It was kind of like, oh, if we're not careful, we're going to lose David forever, right? And so they kind of backed off on the real putting their feet down on things, and I was just turning 18, and so it was kind of like I was just coming into age. And and then having a valid excuse. I was working late. I wasn't going to work until 3:00 in the morning, and then get up and be at Sunday morning service at 9. So they kind of stopped expecting that, and I didn't really realize how that was seen by the rest of my church until I was about to get married. And so I met my first wife, and we I still, she was very much a Christian, is very much a Christian, and her parents certainly didn't want her fornicating outside of wedlock. Neither did mine. And so I'm at 21, she was 18, we got married. And I remember my pastor. This is Pastor Jerry. He's literally known him my entire life. He grew up in the same little town that I did, of course. And I remember him saying to me, "Oh, well, because of your family's position in the church, you won't be charged for this. We won't charge you any money for having the wedding at our church." And I was kind of like, really? I mean, I went to this youth group for 5 years. Really? Is that how you're going to put this? But I hadn't even thought that was the way that they thought of me. Was because of my family's position in the church.
In other words, they'll cut you some slack.
Yeah, like we know you're a heathen, but we're still going to. Well, it was all very. There's I think Gail talked about this idea of Baptist Calvinism.
And for people who don't know who you're referring to,
excuse me, Gail Jordan, our executive director, and my good friend. She talked about Baptist Calvinism, and once saved, always saved. And I knew some Calvinists growing up. We were not Calvinists. You could backslide was the term we would use. So someone who's backslidden could, was somebody who went to church, doesn't go to church anymore, and isn't living right and isn't doing the right things. So that's how they viewed me. And I would occasionally run into my mom's friends. They would say things like, "Well, if you were to be struck dead right now, do you think you would go to heaven?" And then I would quickly say a quick little prayer of forgiveness and be like, "Yep." So I was very, very much still believing, well into my 30s, really.
You were fortunate, by the way, because if you're a Catholic, saying the little prayer wouldn't help. You got to wait till you see a priest in the confession.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The Protestants kind of have that no priesthood thing locked down. But and I won't go into much of my ex-wife and I pursued churches in our 20s. I basically supported my ex-wife while she was getting her degree in child and development counseling, psychology. And
how religious was she? And did it not bother her that you were starting to doubt things?
yeah, so I never put it that way. I was never doubting. I was figuring things out, right? And I was figuring out the true path, the truth, based on the Bible, based on Scripture and versus dogma, right? And so that's kind of how I viewed it at that time. And no, I never expressed it that way. I never expressed it as doubt. In fact, very close to the end of our relationship, I remember her coming to me and saying, I feel like when I pray, Jesus doesn't hear my prayers. And that was the first time I ever heard her doubt, or even that entered, that had never even occurred to me, that Jesus wasn't listening to your prayers. So, and that was, that was well into my 30s. So no, but she did want to go to church. She wanted to attend church, but she didn't want to go by herself. She didn't want to be like a pew widow, right? I don't know what there's a kind of a thing where some women go to church and their husbands don't, and it's kind of a unequally yoked situation. But she didn't want to do that. So she wanted, but we would go to church. I remember our first school we went to, just what looked like a regular non-denominational church, and it turned out to be an Assemblies of God church, and they were literally saying that they're reading off the script that my dad used to read off of, for like a baby dedication. We did baby dedications instead of baptisms. That's a thing where you get a fresh baby, instead of having it sprinkled, you say these words that were in a script, and that was you dedicate that baby to the Lord, and then later on they can choose to be baptized or whatnot. Boy, I glossed over all of that stuff too.
You used a phrase that I had never heard, by the way, as a Catholic, until talking to people from recovering from religion, yoked, unequally yoked.
Well, unequally yoked, yeah. Actually, boy, someone used that phrase this year or last year to refer to the vice president and his Hindu wife. That's a thing people still worry about. But yeah, it particularly when it's the man, because the man is supposed to be the head of the household, and he's supposed to live a godly life and run a godly household. And it's hard to have, God in your children's life if your husband isn't.
Yeah, I had a problem understanding the yoked, because yolk is the center of an egg. I didn't quite get that.
A yoke of oxen, I believe, is where that Bible comes from. It's very Old Testament, very
you pick two animals symmetrically pulling a load, right? They're equally.
Plowing a field, right? That is really what it is. A yoke tethers the two oxen to a plow.
I was a city boy. I didn't know about yoking animals, so.
But yeah, if you're unequally yoked, then one of the oxen is working harder than the other. So that's definitely the analogy that they're trying to give, is that if you're unequally yoked, then this person in the relationship has to work harder at being a good Christian than because the other person.
And I guess if that becomes public, by which one person is going to church and the other person doesn't have an excuse, like they work those hours or something, right? That becomes public, and then you have to try to explain why that is.
That was always something that would come up, and people would go to my ex-wife and ask her about, how's David doing in his faith? And, really, this entire time my faith was disintegrating, right? Like, it absolutely was. But I never saw it that way. I always saw it as I was finding the right answers and I was getting myself on the right path, right? In fact, there was a point where I found humanism, and I was kind of like, this is an interesting concept. And I found it in a really weird way, because I found it through the old humanism, which is from the 14th century, 15th century. Thomas More was an advisor of King Henry VIII, and what he practiced is considered humanism or called humanism, but it doesn't resemble anything like what we consider modern humanism. And so it was like one of these weird things where I was like, oh, this is kind of an interesting concept. And I kind of did some reading about it. I was like, I kind of like that. I kind of like the idea of it was the idea of the many paths to God, which is kind of the universalist viewpoint. And that, yeah, you have John 3:16, you got to believe in Jesus, but, if you believe in Jesus, that's pretty much it. And then there's, the many paths to God. That was kind of how my universalist and humanism kind of kicked in. But again, still very much holding on to the Trinity, holding off onto. So Pentecostals are tongue speakers, right?
Did you do that? Did you speak in tongues?
Yeah, absolutely. I still can. It doesn't go away.
Give me an example, please. I have not seen people do that live. I have not. Well, once in my life, I witnessed it in a church setting, and it was scary.
Because it is literally just gibberish, right? You're just saying, you're just throwing syllables out, right?
But like when you just did that, you knew you were doing it to show me. But when you're doing it in church, do you feel like something is taking over you, or what?
Yeah, you do actually. So the main doctrinal difference between Pentecostals and Baptists, like they are so similar. They're so similar. But I knew because in Springfield, Missouri, there are two Bible colleges. My dad went to the Pentecostal one, and the other one was the Baptist. And we didn't talk to the Baptists. And I was always like, why don't we talk to the Baptists? But it is because of the interpretation of the day of Pentecost, which is after Christ's resurrection. There was a period of time where the church was kind of waiting. It was kind of waiting around, and then the Holy Spirit came upon them, and they spoke in tongues, and they literally had flames of fire on their heads. This is why when you drive past some churches, you see a dove, which is the Holy Ghost, and some churches you see a flame. In my church, we had flames.
So as a Catholic, I interpreted this, and I don't know if this is official or what, or just my understanding as a kid when I was learning it in Catholic school. When they were given the power of tongues, someone, said, what is your native tongue? It just means a language. It doesn't mean gibberish. And my interpretation was, by some magic, they were given the power to communicate in other languages, real languages, with people around them so they could bring them to Christianity. I never envisioned it was speaking gibberish that no one can understand around you. And I said, why would God do that? I don't get that.
So that is half of it. So there were stories about missionaries going to other countries and then just suddenly being able to speak the language of this tribe that nobody knew the language of, and minister to them and preach the gospel in their native language using the Holy Spirit. So that was absolutely something that Pentecostals claim that can be done. But what I did just then, that is an example of the divine language. So that's the language angels speak.
Now, where does that come from in the Bible and in the story?
It's nowhere in the Bible. Yeah, no, it doesn't exist. Where it comes from historically is the Great Awakening, and people right around the last turn of the century. So coming into the 1900s, there was the Great Awakening and Great Revival. And a lot of those people started doing this kind of gibberish. There was no divine language. Nobody ever did this before that. I don't think. I might not be 100% true, but Protestants generally, like Lutherans, never spoke in tongues. So
Church of England doesn't do that. Yeah.
So this came on. This goes into something else that happened in my church, which was something called being slain in the Spirit. So, and this is definitely something that happened to me. It is something that I experienced. It is. I can talk to you about it, about what I think was going on there physically, but it is this overwhelming sense of euphoria. You just feel really good, really happy, really nice. Your brain is flowing with endorphins. You're probably hyperventilated. This is one of the reasons that evangelicals raise their hands too, right? You get your hands up, it puts blood, the blood rushes down out of your hands and into your head, and kind of gives you this nice sense of kind of euphoria. Same with singing. You're taking big, deep breaths and you're kind of hyperventilating that way. But yeah, being slain in the spirit is something else that kind of follows the same sort of hypnotic technique, where you are overwhelmed and you fall over. You've seen these preachers that kind of go up and like push people and they kind of flop over and they kind of lay in the aisle and shake a little bit. Holy rollers, right? This is what we were. And so my church, you could do this on Sunday night. You couldn't do it on Sunday morning. On Sunday morning, there would be sometimes there would be a call and response. So someone, maybe my neighbor Ramona, would stand up and give a message in tongues, would speak in that language, and then someone would stand up and give the interpretation. So, and then those two people probably never talked about it. Like, they're just kind of like, this person was led to do the tongues, and this person was led to do the interpretation. And it was definitely saw as God was working through both of those people. So, like you would see people going up to them after the service and being like, oh, then, thank you much for delivering that word. So that was Sunday morning. But on Sunday evening, we would do the holy roller things, and so then that would include being slain in the spirit, where you're literally overcome with euphoria. You are literally overcome with endorphins, and I mean, again, experienced it on more than a few occasions, and it is quite pleasant, and it's a real thing that's happened. It's a real physical thing that's happening to you, right? Your body is reacting to the stimulus in that environment in this particular way.
And you fully believed it at the time.
I believed that it was the Holy Spirit coming upon me. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I did. So to have people telling me that I was wrong or that I was evil for doing these things, and I was convinced that I wasn't, and I was convinced through speaking with learned scholars and with also reading my Bible an awful lot. So yeah, I had that confidence, and what that did was drive me away from the church. Right? That drove me away from those people, and I saw them as, Jesus called everybody in Judea, basically in Jerusalem, hypocrites, right? And I would just see how he spoke to the religious leaders at the time, and with utter contempt and disrespect, right? Because and so that's kind of how I modeled my, and I thought it was very Christ-like to go up against the church leaders. My wife, my current wife, gets a kick out of this, but I did a puppet ministry while I was at that church. I legit was working to win souls to Christ through puppetry for a little while. Anyways.
Do you feel guilty about having brought souls to Christ and now you don't believe any of that?
Yeah, boy. So later than this, but closer to my teen or late 20s, I was having a lot of these conversations with my social group, and I was a fairly young Earth creationist at that time. I didn't really start believing in old Earth until I was in my later 20s. And I remember telling this kid, evolution is just like believing that a tornado went through a junkyard and assembled a 747, right? I'd used that argument.
I had a coworker who came out and yelled that at me when she found out I wasn't a believer. That must be preached in every church, because everyone uses that example.
I don't know, but I bet you it's in this book. I don't know right off the top of my head, but I bet you, because that's the kind of apologetics in that book. This kid, Steve, I won't use his last name, but and I know he is a devout Christian today, and he was not at that time, And so, yeah, that's on me. I can't beat myself up for those things, though, because I didn't know any better. And honestly, these things were told to me as they were truth by every person I trusted, every person in a position of authority over me, my parents, my teachers, my Sunday school teachers, were telling me that this was the facts. These were the capital T truth. And, so I can't beat myself up too much that as I found my way out of it, honestly, I was never dishonest with my faith. Now, I could have been, boy, and I talked about that with friends and with my wife, could have gone the charlatan route. And I honestly have a hard time with charlatanism. There's a Steve Martin movie where he plays a tent preacher, and he is a charlatan. He does not believe in it, but he's going out and doing these dancing in the aisle preachy things and raking in all the money, and then taking all the money to the bank. And I really was offended by that movie at the time. And it currently today, my wife or friends will ask me, "Oh, do you think that person really believes blah 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 blah?" And I'm like, it's so hard to know. It's so hard to know what somebody really believes in their heart. And I think in a lot of cases, the answer is absolutely not. And they're absolutely faking it. And I could have done that. I could have gone that route. But I would have hated myself. I don't like living dishonestly.
I don't know how people do it, but a lot of people absolutely do. The famous example is James Randi busting Peter Popoff.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
Faith healer and a Christian evangelist who had big tent shows or whatever, and Randy discovered that he was using an earpiece and recorded the transmission from his wife, I believe it was, telling him who to call on in the audience, giving specifics, and you hear the voice of Peter, can you hear me? If you can't hear me, you're going to be in trouble with the show. Call on Mrs. Jones in the first, she lives at 444, South Street. And then he says, Mrs. Jones, 444 South Street. It's like, wow, God's really being specific here. And
so my pastor at Forks Assemblies of God would totally do this. So this is how he would do it. He would go and get, like right before the service, he'd go and get the box, so you could put a card in the box.
Yeah.
Prayer request.
Yeah, that's what Peter Popoff was doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, and he would go and get those, and he would, look at them, and be like, "Oh, back pain, okay," and then you'd be like, "Someone in the congregation is suffering from back pain. Who show you? God has told me that somebody in the congregation." He's literally, and I was kind of like, "Dude, just getting this off the." So yeah, he would totally do that, and now was he a charlatan in that aspect? Absolutely was, right? Like he wasn't getting that message from God; he was getting it off the card, right? And it was kind of a showman technique. But yeah, it's really hard for me to know whether or not folks are true believers or not without, them actually just telling me, right? Because of course, how could you possibly know what's in somebody's head? I jumped back to the past for a while. Let's jump back to.
Well, I did want to know how this all affected your relationship with your first wife.
Yeah. It didn't really. It didn't really. And I won't go into the major details, but basically she got what she needed out of me, which was her master's degree, and left me 9 months after she graduated from college. And that threw me into what ultimately would make me an atheist. It was a little bit slow even still. So, I mean, this is, I think I was, I was 29 years old when she left, I think. No, I was 31. So yeah, I just turned 31. So it had been, this is 15 years coming, right? I was 16 when I first started, and then here I am. So she left, and I took it really, really bad. I started drinking really heavy. I started taking some pills and whatnot. But in addition to that, I also started exposing myself to other things. And one of those things that I exposed myself was Carl Sagan's The Cosmos. I watched for the very first time on Netflix. And that was... I realized people had kept all this stuff from me. I was like, oh, this came out in the 70s? Like, my parents had to have known about this. They had to have known it existed, right? And chose to expose me to, stuff like this instead, right? And so I was like, what else out there? And I mean, I had already kind of started believing in evolution. I had already, I was definitely an old Earth, millions of years kind of guy at that point. And was like, oh yeah, but God started the Big Bang. The Let There Be Light was the Big Bang, and blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of where I was when my ex-wife left. And then watching the cosmos, it was like, oh boy, you don't really need a God to explain this stuff. This stuff kind of explains itself if you actually pay attention to it. And that started me down this path. And the next thing that happened was I had taken a job at Microsoft, and I was sitting in the cafeteria with my boss, and my boss just very nonchalantly says, yeah, I'm an atheist. I don't believe in God. I'm not a libertarian. I don't believe that liberties are, rights are conveyed by God. I believe rights are conveyed by society. And he's just very matter of factly telling me about himself. But like, this is the first time I've ever heard anybody say.
What prompted that? That seems to be an odd conversation to just have it.
It was just me and him hanging out at lunch, and he's just decided to share about himself. Right. And it was really all that it was. And I really don't think that he probably has absolutely no clue to this day that he had this impact on me. Because I didn't make a big deal of it at the time. But in my mind, I was like, oh my God, how can somebody say that? How can you deny the existence of God? Right. And I just never, even Satanists believe in God, right?
Not most of them, or all of them.
No, I know now that that's not true, but at the time, right? If you believe in Satan, you got to believe in God, right? But yeah, and that sent me to places like Reddit, and that sent me to YouTube. Kind of like look into this. I went, I was, I couldn't argue with my boss about this, but I could argue with people on the internet about it, and it was not very long. It was inside of 6 months that I was sitting at my desk, and I was like, I don't believe in God. I don't believe in God anymore. And that was terrifying to me. It was really, really scary. And I was like, oh my, what is my mom going to think? Right. Like, I mean, that was literally my first thought. Like, how am I going to be able to tell this to my mother? And, yeah, I kept that to myself for a really long time. This was probably 2010 or 2011, and I didn't tell anybody that I was an atheist until at least 2012. So it was probably from about probably a year to 18 months that I said to myself that I was an atheist before I ever told another soul.
So you weren't married at this point, so you didn't have a significant other to deal with that. Okay.
No. And so I didn't have that reconciliation. And in fact, in all honesty, so my marriage ended rather abruptly. And in fact, we weren't trying to have a baby to save the marriage, but we were trying to have a baby. We were trying to have a baby because my ex was done with school, and it was like, this was the time we had talked about, starting a family after she was done with school. So there is another reality where I got her pregnant, we stayed together, and I'm probably teaching Sunday school. So I didn't have that to deal with, but I did. I mean, I have people in my life. I was still fairly in contact with her father, and in fact, but that's a whole other story. But his marriage also sort of disintegrated. Her parents' marriage kind of disintegrated not long after this, and but and I was trying to maintain these relationships, and I was trying to maintain a relationship with my brother. My brother just lived on the other side of Lake Washington in Kirkland, Washington, and so for instance, I went to church with them on it was Christmas Day in 2011, and Mars Hills Mars Hill Church. You may not know what that is, but I'm sure some of the folks watching do. That's Mark Driscoll's old church. They were he was on The View with Whoopi Goldberg and those folks talking about how women's private parts are penis homes, and he's a real terrible piece of work. But anyways, I met him on Christmas Day, 2011, going to church with my brother, and I took communion that day, even though I'm not a believer at this point, and I didn't have a problem with the ritual. I didn't have a problem going, and I mostly was maintaining those appearances for, my niece and my nephews, because I didn't want them to be like, oh, Uncle David isn't doing the things that, we all do. And I tried to maintain those relationships. But those fell apart. Well, those fell apart for different reasons, but mostly, here, let me get into why I have all the Bibles. So all these Bibles behind me.
Yes. What is with the actual stack of Bibles?
And this one in particular. So this is a Bible that my mom sent me in this time period. And there's a paragraph of text that she wrote to me.
So read. You want to read what that says?
Oh, not really. It's not. She quotes a Bible verse, and it's not particularly important to the conversation. But she must have at this point realized, or had been told, that I was a non-believer, or that I was wavering or questioning, because I was talking to her about Bible study and whatnot. I don't know if you can see you can't see the big book right here. That's a strong concordance. It has every Bible verse in Greek and Hebrew, or every Bible word in Greek and Hebrew, and what its actual literal meaning is. It's used in Bible studies and whatnot. So, but I was talking to her about Bible study, and I said, oh yeah, I mostly do my Bible study online, because there's these really good websites and they have concordances in them, and I can go and see what the actual Hebrew says and things like that. And after that conversation, she mailed me this Bible unprompted. And I called her after I received it, and I said, Mom, I have several Bibles. I actually had my boyhood Bible, which I do not have here, and I'll explain why I don't have my boyhood Bible anymore. But I actually had my boyhood Bible that they, had my, gold leaf name on it still. And I was like, Mom, I have Bibles. And she's like, oh, well, I just wanted to make sure that you had a Bible in case there was, the internet didn't exist anymore, or, you didn't have electricity, you'd still be able to read the Bible. And what she meant by that was after the rapture.
We didn't get into that.
Get raptured and I get left behind. She wanted me to have a Bible. So I still have that Bible. And I take every Bible out of every hotel room that I stay in. And I have others through other means. People have given me their Bibles. They have the stamp inside that basically encourages you to take them. And actually, there's more than just Bibles back there. There are books of Mormon back there. I think I counted these. There's about 40 Bibles there. I have several boxes downstairs that aren't in that pile. And then I have, in addition to that, there's probably about 40 books of Mormon, or about 30 books of Mormon, because I stay at Marriott properties a lot, and they're owned by Mormons. If anyone's watching this and you are going to do a production of the Book of Mormon, and you do not want to contact the Church of Latter-day Saints, get a hold of me and I will send you enough books of Mormon to do your production. So just let me know. So after that, I kind of took that sourly. I was like, send me a Bible. I already have a Bible. So that's kind of become my thing, is I like to take Bibles when I find them. But I take the free Bibles. I haven't ever stolen a Bible. So, I have a hardback Book of Mormon that I picked up in a hotel room, and it has like somebody's testimony in it. And it's like, I assert that what's in this book is true, and that all of, and it's, it's kind of an interesting, anthropology of people writing in hotel Bibles, and then, now I have them. But
So, all right, besides the ones that are special like that, perhaps with somebody's testimony in it, most of them are just the book. Why keep them all? Like, what's the point of this?
That's something well, I had in my basement a little kind of display, like a little altar, and I moved these up just for our discussion today and into my office. But uh, I don't know. I just people I have a touch of the tism, as they say, and it's one of those things that it's kind of a collectible thing. I can kind of see it grow in mass. Like I said, I have a couple of boxes full now that's kind of thrown outside of its original idea of being kind of an artistic display. But,
Okay.
no, other than that, I don't have any real good reason for keeping them. But I would I am very serious about it. If you're doing a production of the Book of Mormon and you would like some books of Mormon, please let me know, because I have them.
All right. So let me ask some of the typical questions I ask people here. Did you ever become an angry atheist?
Yeah. So right here, because it was like, oh, everybody's lied to me, right? My parents have lied to me. My pastors lied to me. Everybody's lied to me about what's going on, right? Like, these people must know this isn't true. They must have had doubts at some point in their life, and And so I did. In fact, I cursedly started a YouTube channel. I've taken a lot of those videos down for professional reasons. I had coworkers find them. Basically. So I still, at this point, I still wanted to have a relationship with my family. I still wanted to have a relationship with my brother. I still wanted to have a relationship with my mom, and they were very resistant to it. And so it was clear to me that they understood. It was clear to me that they knew, at least, that I was doubting, or at least that I wasn't their kind of Christian. And so I was reading books like David McGathy's Mom, Dad, I'm an Atheist, and like kind of preparing for these conversations that I was going to have with them. And spoiler alert, that never happened. I have never talked with my mom or my brother about these things at all. In fact, I'm somewhat hoping that they might stumble upon this video and see this. So, hi, Mom. My proxy for them, my proxy to kind of get this stuff out of my system, was the sign holding street preachers, the hellfire and brimstone, you're gonna burn in hell. These guys that hold these 20-foot signs at your local pride events, or your local, they would come everywhere in Seattle. They'd go to anywhere that there was more than 300 people. It was the ones that were like, you're going to burn in hell on the sign, or it's like, basically it had this laundry list of like, all the best things to do. And like, these are people who are going to go to hell. I would walk right up to those people and engage. And I was like, you're holding a 20-foot sign, you're inviting this engagement, right? Like that was kind of my philosophy. And I wouldn't argue. I would argue counter apologetics. So apologetics is kind of arguing using Bible verses about different various things. So like the scientific creationism book, this is an apologetic. You use the Bible to make the counter apologetic. So because Christians don't believe in science, they don't believe in, you can't argue facts and logic. What you can argue are, what's in the Bible. A lot of this does come from self-hating, and the fervent belief comes from self-hating. Like, a lot of people are Sunday go to church Christians, or maybe go to church every other month, or maybe go to church on Christmas. They don't really care what other people do. But it's the people who really, really hate themselves that really get. I think about my father a lot. The man who goes to church 4 times a week can't forgive himself for something, right? And That is absolutely true. If you have a guilty conscience, you're there every time the doors open. If you're living life well and you're happy and content with your life, you don't feel compelled to go to church that much. You don't feel compelled to go out and make sure people don't burn in hell. But yeah, so that was my angry atheism phase, was going and screaming at these kids and not kids, they're adults.
So assuming you did, what got you past that phase?
I think it's so I lived in Seattle I lived in Washington State most of my life, and I lived in Seattle until about 2019. Now I live in Pennsylvania, and I think just moving away from it, it also, my whole thing with my family kind of came to a head at that point too. So it was kind of like, I'm done having these conversations. I'm done trying to convince. I'm done. So like I said, I was using them as a proxy for my family because I wanted to have these conversations with my family. I wanted my family to understand why I had decided to be an atheist and why I no longer believed in God. And I wasn't going to be able to. So I kind of used them as this proxy. And by the time I had moved out here and had disconnected from my family, I didn't feel the need to do it anymore. And in fact, I have seen those folks out and about. I've seen them here, and I live in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and there's not a huge town, but it's big enough to attract these folks. And I have seen them out, and I have not engaged them. So it did just kind of work its way out. I kind of got what I wanted. I don't know that I don't think that I got what I wanted, but I think I was satiated. So what led up to that business? So fast forward a little bit, I've met my current wife, and she ends up through a series of needs and our relationship improving, we end up moving in together. Let me think about I am in my 30s. I'm 36 or so at this time, right? Like, I am a grown man. I'm an adult. And but the way that my family viewed that relationship was like I was literally living in sin, right? I may as well have been dating a man, as far as they were concerned. And so there was this kind of a long story into my mother moving. My mother was in a cult. I don't know how to put it any other way. My wife says that, if you live with everybody that you go to church with, you're probably in a cult. That's the situation. They ended up kicking her out. I don't know the particulars, but she was no longer involved in this cult, and she moved back to Seattle abruptly. And I would like to say my brother and I made sure that she had an apartment and a nice place to stay, but my brother's wife wouldn't allow him to spend money on her. So it was just me. I wrote the checks and made sure that she had a place to stay in Seattle and whatnot. That was Thanksgiving. And I was in the middle of my choir season. So I used to sing in with Seattle Men's Chorus and other gay and lesbian choruses. And we were just about ready to start our winter concert. And so so I was like, hey, I can't really devote a lot of time to you, but once Christmas rolls around, we'll spend Christmas together, and then we'll kind of go from there. Well, between that and actual Christmas, my brother decided to invite my mom to Christmas, and then decided that I wasn't invited, and I just never got it and never heard from them. And this was actually pretty common. Like, I would hear from my brother like Friday, Easter, and he'd be like, "Oh, you want to come over? Go to Easter Sunday and come over for dinner?" And I'd be like, "I got plans. Like, it's like 2 days away. Like I have like." So what I was expecting that year, this was Christmas 2017. Christmas 2016. So going into 2017, I was expecting him to, like, last minute call and invite me to Christmas, because that's kind of what they did. And that call never came. And it was just like it was me getting my hopes up that my family was going to treat me well, and then them not. And like, it was like, oh, I allowed myself to, be vulnerable, and then they just hurt me again, which is something I was very calloused against. And I figured, since here our living mother, my father's passed away at this point. Our living mother, our only living parent, you would invite me, at least me, to Christmas. Well, I don't know this. This is speculation, but I because I know my brother well, and I know my former religion well. It was because they would have had to invite my wife, and we weren't married at the time, and having to explain to their children, that creates that awkward situation. And again, just like if I were dating a man, it would literally no difference to them that I was living in sin, and that somehow that they would have to tell their children about this, and I'm almost certain that's why they didn't invite me to Christmas. And I really resented it. It finished destroying our relationship. And so yeah, so for a little bit longer, I had a kind of a tentative relationship with my mother, where I was still talking to her fairly often. And like my niece's graduation came around, and she'd be like, your brother would really like it if you came to your niece's graduation. I'm like, well, you could pick up the phone and call me and tell me that. And I never got an invitation from them, and I ended up sending her a check, not going to her graduation. Just normal family stuff that you would think that you would want your brother to. Anyways, but and then right before we were getting ready to move out here, I was done with Seattle. I was done with my job there, and we were looking at houses out here. We literally looked at this house that I'm in now, and my mom did something that she's done many, many, many times in my life. Was she had somebody contact me, my brother. She had my brother contact me out of the blue after not talking to him for almost a year, and he wanted to go to lunch with me. And I was like, wait, why are you contacting me? And he's like, oh, because I want to start a relationship with you. Now, what he was really doing was he was calling to ambush me with my mom. So this is one of the things and I did this with my mom once, where there's this thing in Matthew 18 where if your brother is in sin, you're supposed to go to him and talk to him about his sin, and if then he repents, then then it's fine, and he's repented. But if he's refusing to repent, then you go and you bring him in front of one or two others, and this is the one or two others part of excommunication. This is excommunication. And then if he refuses to turn, then you bring him in front of the elders of the church. And if he refuses to turn after that, then you kick him out. So and my mom had done this to several people, and now she's trying to do it to me, and I see right through it. And I was again just about done with my time in Seattle, and I hadn't spoken to my brother in over a year. I had not spoken to my mom in a few months, and this had happened. And I was just like, no, I'm not going to let you ambush me into something that you think that you should do with Christians, that I'm not a Christian anymore. Like, you can't hold me accountable to Christian values when I'm not a Christian anymore. And I refused to meet with them, and that was it. I was just like, no, you can't keep abusing me like this. And so I completely cut ties with both of them that day, and I haven't spoken to either of them since. And that finale was as much as I would love to have had a good relationship with my brother growing throughout my life, it's just never going to happen, and never would happen. And as much as I would like to have a healthy relationship with my family, it's just not going to happen. And I had to make that decision myself. I had to be like, no, you are done hurting me. You're done abusing me. And I walked away and moved out here. And we have my wife and her family here. They're great. They love me very much. It's really an amazing situation where I've landed. And so it kind of took away that need to try to convince them that it was okay that I didn't believe in God. Trying to find a place where people like you and like you for who you are and not what you believe is just really important.
Yeah, it's one of the things we try to aid people with here at Recovering from Religion by providing some small ways to have a community. So what attracted you to become a volunteer here, and what do you do?
Yeah, I am the IT director. I kind of keep the lights on, and I am on the board of directors, so I'm kind of part of the governing body. Yeah, and I really find, this is also part of my chosen family, and I really find this work very rewarding. I did not have anything like this when I was, stumbling my way out. um, and I kind of wish I had. And um, uh, through some of this, I ended up going to a secular convention, and the Texas Secular Convention was the first kind of atheist convention I went to. And then that was really kind of a nothing burger. And then I went to ApostaCon after that. That's where I met Dr. Ray. And
Who is our founder and current president.
And in fact, I recognized his laugh from across the way. I had heard him on a podcast previously, and I heard him laugh, and I walked right up to him. I'm like, "Are you Dr. Ray?"
He does have.
He has no recollection of this interaction, by the way. But,
so he probably gets tons of people coming up to my conferences and conventions. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and I started volunteering with RfR not very long after that. They contacted me in order to rebuild the Secular Therapy Project. So the current iteration of the Secular Therapy Project is I'm a web developer by trade, and that's all my I did all the principal work.
So for people who don't know what that is,
yeah, the Secular Therapy Project is a place where you can go to get vetted professional resources for counseling and therapy, where your counselor won't try to read the Bible with you or pray with you, and they use evidence-based techniques like cognitive behavioral therapy and other such techniques to help you with issues, and will I currently am in therapy, and I found my therapist off the Secular Therapy Project. So I am not only the founder, I am a client.
So for people looking for that kind of thing, by the way, we do link to that on our main page, recoveringfromreligion.org. Right.
Yeah, it's just seculartherapy.org.
Right. Yeah, you can go there directly. So you said you work IT, so you work their website and that sort of thing for them?
Yeah, I do. I do all sorts of work, but yes, I have edited the website. I know you often edit the website, as does Nathan, and I do a lot of the account administration. So, if we need to set up a new email, or get people into our Slack spaces and stuff like that, I administrate a lot of that stuff as well.
Okay, so for people who've stumbled on this and made it to this point, if you want to find out more about our organization, all the things we do, there's a 3-minute video on the main page, which is RfR What We Do. Just 3 minutes long, and it shows you all of our services. So, okay, anything else that we haven't covered that you want to say before we say goodbye?
No, I think that's very much very, very well done. So thank you so much for having me.